All right. Pamela Garfield-Jaegar, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm great. Happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. I really respect how you speak out on these issues. I think your approach to them is very graceful. There's tact and even some humor,
Yeah.
um, which I appreciate. The video of you, like as the leftist therapist, talking back and forth is perfect. Really encapsulates, I think, how a lot of people feel. Um, And today we're here to talk about your new book coming out on March 12th, which is Detransitioner Awareness Day. And it's called A Practical Response to Gender Distress Tips and Tools for Families. What made you want to write the book?
Well, I actually wrote a smaller version of this book already, which is on my website. And I was going to originally just sort of print that out and make it like a little booklet so that it was in print, so that when I was in events or people just wanted a hard copy as opposed to doing things online, I had it available. So I started to go over it, and then I was like, oh, I want to add this. I want to add that. I want to add this. And then it turned into a book. I just realized that I had so much to say there, and really, I've personally learned so much from getting to know detransitioners and reading so much in the space, talking to parents, and then applying it to my past experience. I felt like it was a good juxtaposition of I have so much experience with families and teens, really not related to gender because this is a relatively new issue that widespread. It wasn't a big issue, I'd say 5-6 years ago, but I know a lot about teens and families and communication, so a lot of it just applies that knowledge. So I just wanted to integrate all of that, and it turned into a book and I wanted to put it out there.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited to read it once it's released. You also just did uh, a hearing, correct, in Kansas?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
testified in Kansas. I was with detransitioner Chloe Cole, and I was with Jamie Reed, and I was with a doctor named Ivan. I actually forgot his last name, but he's a doctor who worked with trans adults for many, many years. Jamie Reed was at a gender clinic in Missouri. She's now sort of famous for blowing the whistle and has gotten some programs shut down as a result of the things that she has spoken out on. And of course, Chloe Cole, those who are following this topic know who she is. She's now 19 years old, but she believes she was a boy when she started at age 12, 13, and had the double mastectomy and has a lot of still remaining issues from taking testosterone and puberty blockers. And she's been very outspoken on the topic. So I was there to testify for a bill that will ban transgender medicine for children in Kansas.
Yeah, they're still deciding on it at this time.
Yeah, they're still
Okay.
deciding. I asked them when is the vote. No one knew yet. I don't think it's scheduled yet.
Okay.
But we got a lot of positive feedback, and our opposition did not do itself any favors. They really made themselves look crazy.
Yeah, your testimony was really, really good. Left nothing ambiguous about it. Um,
Thank you. Yeah, I was
oh,
actually just a little behind the scenes. They told me I had 5 minutes to speak, and then literally at the last minute when we walked in, they said, "No, you got 2.5 minutes." So I took my paper with my speech and scratched off like 3 paragraphs. I'm not even sure what. I wasn't sure if it was going to even make sense because I didn't get a chance to reread it to see. But it came together, so I'm really happy about that. A
yeah, no,
little.
it's a powerful clip. I encourage anyone to watch that. And is that kind of normal in those situations? Kind of last minute, they'll be like, "Oh, we've cut it down."
I think so. I think the people that gave us that instructions got the wrong information. So
Okay.
I'm not sure. I think there was a little bit of a communication issue, but it worked out. And I can't believe I winged it. And then the people I was with were pros. They've been doing these testimonies a lot more than me. I've only done it once before, so I was more nervous, but I
Yeah,
pulled it off. Yeah.
it's great. And that is kind of the puberty blocker issue is pretty a big part of the book, I would imagine. Like one of the kind of the key.
It's a piece of it. So yeah, I have a
Right.
whole chapter basically on all the harms. It's called, I think it's in the chapter where I say the modern day lobotomy, and then it
Okay.
goes into all the harms of the chemicals that they give children and adults, quite frankly. Well, the puberty blockers they don't give to adults, but the
Right.
testosterone it's harmful for adults and children. We're just focusing right now on children because we kind of got to choose our battles.
Yeah.
But yeah, the puberty blockers are mentioned in there. If you go online on YouTube, it's still up. The president of WPATH, whose name is Marcy Bowers, actually was in a Zoom call with, I believe, Yale, and just admitted flat out that any boy who takes puberty blockers before puberty will never be able to function sexually, will never be able to receive an orgasm. And the way he says it is, we'll never be able to receive an orgasm. I mean, zero. Like
Wow.
it was really a pretty apparent, and it's still online. It went pretty viral among our circles. So anyway, that's quoted because people keep saying these things are reversible. They even said it. Some doctor, who was against the bill, who's for all of this gender medicine, said puberty blockers are reversible, 100% reversible. I mean, that is just a blatant lie. There are so many things wrong with it. I mean, I could go into many more things that it does, but if you just use common sense, how can blocking puberty be reversible? How can we think that that's going to have no harms? Just using common sense, besides looking at the data, the science, the fact that it harms the bone development, cognitive development, people end up with pain, joint pain, just all kinds of sexual function, as I said. Brain swelling, the FDA actually put out a warning that there will be brain swelling and can cause blindness. There's so many different
I've not
things.
heard that before. Wow.
Yeah, it came out, I
Wow.
think, in 2021.
Wow.
And that's quoted in my book. So, it's a lot of things that parents don't know. Talk about lack of informed consent. That if they're taught, and they're told by their doctors and their therapists, and it's everywhere online that it's reversible. Or even if you Google it, you can Google puberty blockers are reversible, and you can find articles that say they're reversible, which is just a lie.
Right.
So, yeah, my book basically goes against all of these big lies that are out there. It's tough to figure out what's true and what's not, but you have to scratch under the surface to find it.
Yeah. And, you know, you said Googling. I mean, so much of this, I feel like, is just young kids going down a rabbit hole um, in social media, YouTube, things like that. Um, that's kind of another big chapter in the book.
Yeah, so I have a whole chapter on kind of why would a young person choose to be transgender? And
Hmm.
one of the big influences, as you said, is social media, the internet. And there's so many, usually there are underlying issues, and then the internet just kind of leads them down that path.
Hmm.
So yeah, I talk a lot about that. And then there's a chapter on like what you can do as a parent. And the number one advice is get them off their devices, get them outside, get them in their bodies, get them around people, get them around your family, people that love them. Because when they're online and they're alone and they're socially isolated, they're kind of disassociating from their body, and they're being brainwashed by all of this propaganda that it says that they're loved by some stranger online, they're enough because they're trans, as opposed to being enough because they're actually who they are. There's a lot of manipulation, and then of course they get a lot of positive feedback if they start posting their transition or even questioning it. They'll have a lot of people tell them that they're wonderful. They call it love bombing. And
Yeah.
yeah, so there's so much to it. Some of it's actual predators. They could actually send secret hormones and binders. The binder is the thing that girls use to flatten their breasts, which
Right.
people also believe is harmless. But no, you talk to people who use them, and they have trouble breathing. Their ribs are permanently deformed from it. And then it deforms the breast, so then it leads people to want to get the top surgery more because it's also uncomfortable to wear them. So of course it's sort of like a gateway to getting surgery. So people act like it's just, what's the big deal? It's just an elastic band. Well, it actually is a big deal. And they get people, a lot of strangers will send those to kids secretly in like a secret box so their parents won't see from the internet.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah.
That's rough.
Yeah, so
Um,
people don't realize just there's so many different influences out there, and I mean even just the basics, it's just everywhere. And that's part of what I say. I think it's like we're almost like fish swimming in water. We don't realize we're swimming in like trans water now. It's everywhere. Everywhere you go, everywhere you turn. And maybe as adults we kind of ignore it and say, yeah, whatever, it's no big deal. But if you're a kid and this is all you know, then it becomes a big influence.
yeah, I can imagine. Um, one of the other things I've seen in the book is therapists are actually trained to blackmail parents.
Yes.
How does that work?
Yeah. So I've now done 2 trainings on what I call how to manipulate parents to get them to trans their kids. But they'll say something like how to support families of gender diverse children is like how they'll
Okay,
frame it. And
right.
they'll give this whole training on helping parents who are ambivalent about it. Basically, parents who know this is wrong, either just because of their values or they don't, they know their child is, they believe in truth and they know their child is a boy or a girl, or they even have questions about what these medical interventions and what that means in the long run. But instead of them having these real questions and real concerns for their child's mental and physical well-being, the therapist will basically manipulate them and tell them that they're now grieving their cis child, and they need to accept that the reality is they have a trans child, and to be a good parent and a good loving parent is to let go of that cis child and accept that their child is trans without asking any questions at all and exploring anything else. And for those that don't know, the term cis is used for people. It's kind of backwards. It means you're not trans. So they're trying to
Mhm.
make something that's normal abnormal, so that it's sort of backwards. So like I guess they would call me cis, like I'm a cis het white woman,
Yeah,
and
cishet
those
white
are the
male.
worst things when you're a leftist to be. And so a lot
Mhm.
of kids want to opt out of those identities. So the parents are taught now to mourn and grieve their cis child. And yeah, I pretended like I sort of agreed, but with like questions, and I asked like, how, what do you do? Oh yeah, this was a really interesting thing. I just tweeted about this, and it got a lot of traction because I kind of realized that these instructors kind of hate Black people. They hate their culture because it turns
Hmm.
out Black families don't buy into this. They don't. They're harder to manipulate, and they're harder to convince that their child is suddenly trans.
Yeah.
So, so there was a whole section in this training I just took a week ago. This wasn't in my book, but about the race part. But in general, there was a whole section about how you have to convince people of color, a BIPOC. What is that? I forgot what that acronym stands for, but like,
Black, indigenous, people of color.
there you
Is that
go.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so everything's all of a sudden indigenous too, which is like hilarious
Mhm.
and stupid. So you got to convince all these BIPOC people that it's not just a white issue, that their kids are trans too, and it's a problem. It's a struggle. You have to really work with them, and help them understand that they're being obtuse by not accepting that their child is a trans kid. Um, that was a weird flex, I thought, for a group of people who supposedly are so, pro minorities and diversity. As soon as
Mhm.
they have someone who thinks differently than them, they say we have to manipulate them to think like us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've seen that sort of like it's almost like if you uh it's almost like it's a package deal, I guess. Like I went on one of the websites and uh they're talking about like dismantling white supremacy, we have to take back colonization, and I'm like, what happened to just a kid, being confused or having stress?
Yeah.
uh
Yeah, so therapists are no longer therapists. They're
mhm.
activists. And bringing social justice into therapy is completely against everything that mental health should be, because let's just say for a second, I don't believe in most of these things, but let's just say for a
Mhm.
second that um, there's systemic racism and there's all this injustice that, a person is a victim of. How is bringing that up in therapy and therapeutic at all when someone is
Right.
struggling? with their anxiety. So if someone's anxious and someone's having an identity crisis, let's bring up the fact that the whole world is against them right now and say that's therapeutic. No. And that's what they're
Yeah,
doing, and especially with the trans, they're really reinforcing that victim mentality in the trainings. I felt like when I was in this training, I was being rallied like by this cult leader to that was my job to save all these kids from this horrible injustice, including their parents who love them.
do people pay for these? I mean, these trainings and things like that. Like, is this big business? I always wonder.
It is big business. I actually got into this training for free because I'm in this family therapy group that I've been in since 2008. It was run by someone from WPATH, so I think they get funding to do it. But there are
Okay.
tons of trainings that are really expensive. Excuse me. The one training I went to last year, I actually paid a lot of money for it, and I didn't realize I was in front of one of the big chiefs of this entire ideology. Her name is Dr. Joanna Olson Kennedy. I didn't know who she was at the time, but she was famous for saying that if you get your breast cut off, you could just go get new ones, no big deal. So it's reversible. Um, yeah, she's the head of the UCLA Children's Hospital
Wow.
gender clinic, the gender section of the UCLA Children's Hospital. And she's had several videos online. There's one from 2012 that was on NBC where she just threatened the news anchor. Well, there's suicide. So when the news anchor said, "Well, what about kids who are just trying to figure themselves out?" I forgot exactly what she asked, but it was a very simple, common sense question. And of course, all she said was, "Well, kids can choose to kill themselves." It's
And that
very manipulative.
they go for that often,
Hmm.
which I don't understand. Usually, I mean that's manipulative relationships, right? Like a bad partner would be like, "Oh, I'm gonna kill myself if you leave me," that kind of thing.
Exactly. That's the
And
exact
that's
analogy I think of. That's exactly what they're
but,
doing. And that's kind of what I said in my testimony, which you probably heard me say, is we're teaching
Mhm.
kids that we need to threaten suicide to receive love, which is a terrible lesson to give kids. We're
Yes,
teaching them to have personality disorders.
yeah, that's wow, that's really shocking.
Yeah. And as the
But
therapist doing it, that's what's shocking to me,
right,
that's why and I've worked with a lot of people who struggle with borderline personality, or usually it's people who've had trauma in their past, which is why people who have trauma gravitate towards this trans thing. Well, there's a lot of reasons, but that's having those traits makes it easier to fall into this. And I've worked with clinically, I just work with that population. So I feel like I've worked with the people who are trans before they were told to be trans. So I
right,
kind of know them, I know how they think. I know they're in a lot of pain and I know they need help. But this is not the help they need, though.
yeah. Um, as far as tips for parents when they're talking to their kids, what are some of the advice that you have when you need to talk to your teenagers finally coming home with these beliefs?
Yeah, so I have a chapter on this, and I start the chapter by saying there is no script I can give anybody, because
Right.
I think a lot of parents feel so lost. They want kind of like this handbook of like a script, or like, what do I say? What do I do? And you can't have that because you're you and your kid is your kid and people are individuals and your relationship is going to be different. You're going to talk to them depending on the relationship you have with your child. But I do give some general tips and ideas and things to maybe think about so that you can apply it to your situation. But the main thing is, I mean, the main message is to give is, well, the one tip I give is don't give in to the pronouns and the new name and all of that, because a lot of parents sort of give into it thinking, well, I just want to, avoid the conflict, and I don't want to get into it. Um, but then it snowballs. Usually it starts with kind of a smaller demand, and it snowballs to more and more, and then you're kind of stuck in it. And the kid just kind of gets buried deeper and deeper into this more cult-like mentality, and it can get really ugly. So I wouldn't confront it. You don't want to say, no, you're so and so, you're a boy, you're a girl, and keep yelling that at them, because then that'll push them further away. But also sort of try to I would say avoid it, and kind of just be more present with them. Um, so yeah, and depending on your relationship, you can have conversations about what brought you to this decision, asking them questions about what makes them uncomfortable being in the body that they're in. Sometimes they'll have real answers. Sometimes it's really they don't even know because they just want to be a part of something, right? So it's
Mhm.
like determining that and helping them connect those dots. And usually the other thing I say in the book is, because I've learned this just from talking to parents and talking to detransitioners, is none of this is, don't expect it to happen quickly. Don't
Right.
expect like you're going to say this magical thing and the kid's going to be like, "Oh yeah, mom, I know. You're right. You're my mom and you're smart and I understand everything you're saying and you're right. Like I can't believe I thought about that." They're going to have to probably come to it on their own, and it usually takes time. So there's got a lot of patience involved. But don't kind of just like go along with it and hope like it's just going to go away, because I think a lot of parents made that unfortunate mistake that they thought it was just a phase and they thought it would go away, but because the society, school, peers, other adults are reinforcing this, they can't snap out of it so easily. And if this were a different world, if this were 5-10 years ago, probably that's probably the best advice, is just ignore it and it'll go away. But the world we're in today, it's not, it doesn't, unfortunately, it doesn't work.
Yeah, and
So
that's tough. I mean, and you're right. It's just so prevalent everywhere. Even as adults, you're dealing with the workplace, school, all of these different things. Who, I mean, do you kind of know where that started, the preferred pronouns? Do we know kind of really where that began? I've never heard like a real who kind of coined that part of
I'm
it.
not, the preferred pronouns thing, I'm not sure. I mean, this stuff has been around since like the 50s, that this
Right.
whole trans identity and queer theory. I think it started to really take off, in these circles in the 80s.
Okay.
I'm not sure who started the whole preferred pronouns thing specifically.
Because that
Um,
seems like it's just, that's, to me, that's been the most kind of like infiltration.
yeah, I've
And
personally first heard about it in 2015. I actually did a full day training at the agency I worked for. I
okay.
was I was working as a school counselor. It was an agency that contracted with the local public schools, and we had school counseling on campus, and we did a full day training with the LGBT people of the agency, and they taught me about preferred pronouns, and I was
Mm.
bamboozled. I thought, well, yeah, this is nice. You want to be kind, and you don't want to be embarrassing about like, are you a boy or a girl? So the person can just tell you, and if we all do it, then he doesn't put one person on the spot. That's the idea behind it. And in a small setting, or when it's just a few people, or certain contexts, like I don't know, I can see how it could make sense. I mean, I'm really against it now, considering what it has become. But I was tricked and thought it was a kind thing to do. Just do this so no one's put on the spot when you know that things are ambivalent, or you can't tell what the person wants to be called, I guess. But I'm not sure who started that. I don't
That,
know. There's the John Money, who started a lot of this queer theory. There's yeah, there's a lot of pioneers of this, and it's been going on since the 60s. I think the first transgender person was in the 40s. I have to really study up on the history again. I've read this stuff, but now I'm not fresh on it all. But in a way, I kind of almost don't want to know. I just want to let. It's like I know it's been around for a long time, and I know it's bad. That's kind of what I know, and I feel like that's enough.
yeah, no, I agree.
Miriam Grossman, I believe she's a psychologist. No, she's a psychiatrist. I'm not sure. Very smart woman who's been talking about this since about 2008. She actually
Hmm.
wrote a book called Lost in Translation, and
Okay.
that book goes into the history. She's really well versed on the history of it. I'm not sure, and I haven't read it because I personally I didn't want to read her book and have it be in the way of what I was writing, because I wanted my ideas to come from myself. So now that I'm
Right.
done with my book, I'm going to read what other people wrote, so I don't so it didn't interfere. But I know she writes a lot about the history in that book. So for people who really want to know the history, you should refer to her book or just probably her website. You can find that information.
Yeah, and um, as let's say you're successful, kind of shielding your team from this, or having this conversations. Um, uh, I think I've heard you say like there is some data that supports that they probably will get past this.
Yeah, I believe
Right?
it's they say if you don't do anything, if a kid who has gender distress, and I use the term gender distress in the title instead of gender dysphoria.
Mhm.
I actually had it as gender dysphoria and I changed it because gender distress is broader.
Right.
Um, Gender dysphoria is the actual diagnosis, and nowadays you don't need to have the actual diagnosis to land in a gender clinic and get hormones. But if you have any kind of gender distress, there's all different, I guess, types, right? There's people who really feel uncomfortable in their body and really feel like they're a boy or girl, or really, really long for it, really hard. And then there's those that are following a trend and they don't really feel that, but they want to be a part of something and they want to be seen. But people who are really feeling that gender distress, if you leave them alone, meaning you don't affirm them, socially, and you don't give them any kind of hormones and surgeries, I believe they say at least 80% of the kids desist just from doing nothing. And those are the people who have real distress. Now that population has broadened because it's become such a trend, a social contagion. So it's hard to measure, really, and it's hard because it's reinforced so much in so many different areas, even if it's not reinforced in the home. But yeah, there's plenty of data that shows that the bulk of kids will feel comfortable as the boy or girl, man or woman that they are meant to grow up as.
Yeah. That's good to hear.
Yeah. And then the other thing
um,
people don't realize, so the people who are opposed, or people that are for transing kids will call me someone like me a conversion therapist, because
right.
they'll say I'm converting them out of being trans, right? And they're kind of co-opting that term from gay and lesbian people when they wanted to not be, either they didn't want to or someone else didn't want them to be gay or lesbian or have those thoughts. They called that conversion therapy, and that has some negative connotations, and even that is controversial whether that's right or wrong. I don't even want to get into it, but they're using that term now for the trans thing. But what I would say, and a lot of other people would say, that transing kids is the real conversion therapy. And a lot of it is converting kids who would more likely grow up to be gay or lesbian, because
Right.
a lot of those kids are the ones that tend to like the opposite, the stereotypically opposite things that a boy or girl would like. So for example, a boy might prefer to wear princessy things, or more girly colors. This is all stereotypical. This is
Yeah, I
all
mean,
very
children
regressive.
experiment.
Yeah.
They play. They have fun.
Yeah, they
Um,
experiment, whatever. But you hear from, that's why gays against groomers has become so loud, because a lot of them say that they would have been trans, right? They would have been
right.
sterilized. They would have been having these health problems. They would have had joint pain. They would have had all kinds of sexual dysfunction, because they would have been told that they were really born in the wrong body, as opposed to acting a little more feminine or acting a little more like a tomboy, because that was just their temperaments, and they were a little different, right? So a lot of this is targeting kids who are a little different. So it's the real conversion therapy is this transgender medicine.
Right. Yeah. And often, when I talk about this with somebody, that kind of deflection question I'll get is, why do you care so much about this?
Yeah.
Do you get that one a lot?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
yeah,
Why do I care? Well, because, I mean, I could go on. Why do I care? Personally, why do I care? Because these are the kids that I've known for my career. I've been a social worker since the late '90s, and I've worked with these kids. I worked in foster care, and I've worked with these vulnerable kids who didn't fit in or had problems in their families, and those are the kids being targeted. So it's like you get to know them intimately, and then you know how they're struggling and how they're so easily can be easily manipulated by all these messages that they're more loved if they do this. And so I care for that reason. I think that's really like why it pulls on my heartstrings so much. But generally speaking, why do I care? Well, one, I think everyone should care because these kids are our future. This is our society. And if kids are convinced that anybody could be anything and reality is meaningless, then our society is going to, it's chaos. I mean, it's really scary and dark if you think about it. Um, this is a form of transhumanism. I didn't really think about that initially, how they really believe that the body is a vessel and it's
Mhm.
inconsequential. So this isn't the old school transsexual school of thought that I think people are still kind of stuck in, where it's like, well, someone just wants to be a man or a woman and let them be, and body autonomy and that sort of thing. That no, they think that the body is a vessel and you could just be whatever you want at any moment, and that creates a lot of chaos for everyone outside, and then for the individual too. So talk about so I'm a person who's clearly a mental health person and cares about the well-being and mental health of people, children and adults. And if they're told that their body is inconsequential and they could be whatever they want and everyone around them could be whatever they want, that creates a lot of anxiety and chaos for society. We can't function with this. Like if this carries on, we will not function as a society. So I don't know why people don't care.
Yeah, it really does surprise me
Yeah.
when I get that kind of, what are you doing? Why do you even care?
This
I,
affects all kinds of families. It affects conservative families, and it also it actually affects the liberal families more. And
right,
the liberal parents who have, voted liberal or voted left their whole lives and has supported all of these, letters and parades and rainbows and never even thought about it. It hit their home, and they're like, "Well, wait a second, this isn't what I thought it was."
right. It's not
So
what's on the box,
yeah, it's not what's
per
on the
usual.
box. And so, trying to paint this as a right left issue, it's really, honestly, the people who lean more left that are being harmed by this the most. So, if you want to say we're the mean, scary right wing extremists, like, well, we're the ones that care about the ones who aren't because
Well,
we
you
just
get
care about
coded that
people.
way.
What?
Like as soon as you speak out at all on this, you're coded that way. That's what they
Yeah,
go with.
exactly.
Even if you're not, I mean, I think most people in general go issue by issue. Of course, there are some that are very one way or the other, but I mean, at least for myself speaking, it depends on what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, and at that hearing in Kansas, so Jamie Reed, she's been on the left her whole life. She
right,
calls herself left of Bernie Sanders. Is how she described herself. I'm not sure where
right,
she's at today, but that's how she
right,
was most of her
right.
life. I think she even called herself an anarchist at one point. Um,
Yeah.
and she's a lesbian herself, and she's married
Mhm.
to a trans person. So she started her testimony saying that, and then everyone in the room perked up because they didn't know what to do with her because
Right,
they couldn't use that, that slur on her, like, oh, you're just a right-wing conservative religious, I don't know, whatever the insult of the day is, that you're
sure,
just a fuddy-duddy that doesn't understand what love is. And
right,
that's not what this is.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been such a learning experience to hear your experience with these issues. We are kind of a music podcast, in truly in spirit. So, uh, you know, this is just kind of a fun lightning round. If you're up for it, just
Yeah.
some quick questions. Who are your favorite musical artists?
Oh my gosh. um well, my favorite musical, well, my favorite concert, okay,
Yeah,
I'll
that would be my next question.
I'll say, like, I'll date myself because, like, I'm a 90s girl, and I still
Yeah.
have memories of the Dave Matthews Band concert I
Oh
went to
yeah.
in 1995. Um, Yeah, and just I still have like the chills thinking about like some of the songs that were played. So I don't know I don't know who's my favorite band, but I mean I like that kind of
Or top
music.
5 or even top 3, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that 90s grunge era.
Um,
Um I don't know.
that was my era. I mean, the Radiohead, Smashing Pumpkins,
Yeah.
Alanis Morissette, all that stuff
Yep.
was fun. Well, awesome. Well, where can everyone find you and your work?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's thetruthfultherapist.org. I actually own truthfultherapist.com, but it's not
Okay.
active. So go on over to .org and you'll find me there if .com pops up.
Yeah.
And there I have you can if you have this in your family or you know someone that's struggling with this, and it doesn't have to be gender, just like other mental health issues, and you trying to just figure out what to do or where to start. I do consultations for families, and really, just so you know, my message is not to run to a therapist. It might be, but really it's more about get, empowering families to handle it on their own, at least in the beginning. Um, so it's consulting with them about maybe if they're seeing a therapist, if that therapist is kosher and doing things appropriate and not pushing ideology on them, and just has appropriate skills, is involving you as a parent. So I do a lot of consultations on those topics, and that's truthfultherapist.org. And then I guess you see my Instagram, which is the.truthfultherapist. And yeah, I need to do more funny stuff. I've slacked on my funny ones. I actually have a whole little idea notepad and things that to put together reels, and I haven't executed many lately, but I have a few. Like I did a one where I've done a few where, sample affirming therapies where I was a goldfish. Did you see that one? And I
I don't
was
think I saw that one. No.
well, I have a
I'll
new
look for
one.
that.
I actually have because I have funny costumes, so I I pulled them out and do silly things. I was an M&M once.
Oh,
Anyway, so
nice.
you can go see funny reels or some of it's serious. So that's where my Instagram is, and then I'm on Twitter as Truth Therapist at Truth Therapist. Um, I have a YouTube that has mostly my Instagram reels, but then some longer videos, just things that I've done, other interviews and whatnot. And that is also The Truthful Therapist. Oh, and I have a Substack, which we
Your
just talked
Substack is
about.
great too. I was going to say that's another
Yeah, so
great.
I have a Substack, which is Pam the Truthful Therapist, and whatever the URL for Substack is, substack.com at substack.com. I forget what it all is. Pam the Truthful Therapist Substack. So that's where you can find me. And then yeah, I have a book coming, and that is linked in all the bios of all the social media, and it'll be on my website too. And it's going to be on Amazon. I got to figure out how to get on Goodreads. I don't know. I'm self publishing, so I'm figuring this all out on my own.
Yeah. Um, I'm sure that makes that easier instead of, you know, dealing with any kind of controversy as far as
Oh yeah.
publishers. I mean, Abigail Schreier, I think even Deborah So had a lot of struggles with that too.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
mean, now that when they put theirs out, like, Abigail Schreier's came out in 2020, and when did Deborah put hers out? Around that time too, right? A little before, maybe. I'm not
I
sure.
think 19 was in
Yeah.
mid-January.
So things were a little more. There's more support now. Things have moved. The needle has moved since then. So there are more people that know what's going on and realize this is an important issue. So there's more support. So I think just the time has changed. Also, I don't have the platforms they have, so I don't know if
Right.
as many people are going to see it and attack it. I'm trying to get on some bigger platforms, and maybe I can.
Uh,
But they probably won't see it. Like, Abigail Schreier just released a new book and it looks great. She was just on Joe Rogan and, all these big podcasts. I'm not going to get on Joe Rogan's podcast. Probably not. Maybe, but I'm not expecting that.
I mean, Megan Murphy got on there.
Megan Murphy
She's
got
been
on
on there a few
there.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where I first like heard you, like the
Yeah.
long form interview. That was really good. And then I think it was the Radical Center.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
the
I'm going
other
to go
one.
back on her channel actually
Awesome.
this week. Yeah. She's great. It's fun. It's
Probably,
it's so cool how all our worlds collide because Radical Center, for people who don't know, her name is Leslie, and she went to Antioch University and a counseling program, and she had to quit because she exposed just how ludicrous the entire program was, and just how just the insanity they were teaching these counselors, young counselors, and she went public about all the madness. And a lot of people sent me her videos, and they were great. She was really smart and exposed a lot of things, and saying a lot of similar things I was saying, but she knew more from the inside, just being straight coming from university. And now we're friends because we met at a conference last year, and I was already on her podcast twice, and I'm going to be on it again. So it's just neat how our worlds collide like that. I really like that piece of this process. Meeting
yeah,
people, you see them online and you meet them in person, and they're cool.
right. Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on. I'll definitely let everyone know about the book when it releases on the 12th. Um, and just keep doing what you're doing. It really does have an impact.
Thank you. Yeah, and March 12th, for those that don't know, is in our circles, it's Detrans Awareness Day, Detransition Awareness Day, because I think it's actually a trans awareness day, and they've kind of co-opted it for the detransitioners. So that has become an annual thing. I think they've done it at least 3 years now, and so that's why I chose that date.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Pamela, again, and I wish you all the success in your success.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.